Let's talk about sick, baby. Let's talk about you and me. Let's talk about putting the pain into campaign, having to pee. Let's talk about sick. Let's talk about sick. All right, so we are talking about putting the sick in CampaignSICK today. I'm here to talk to you about my experience living with chronic illness and working in the campaign community and the progressive community. First off, you can hear I'm a little bit out of breath. We'll get to that later, but I am in the midst, or hopefully at the tail end, of a flare-up of my chronic illness. So before we get into it, I just want to issue a couple of disclaimers. The first thing is, I recognize that when we use the term chronic illness, some people use the term disabled. That encompasses a wide variety of things. So I can only speak to my own personal experiences and what I've been through. I am by no means a doctor nor an expert, and so I just want to be upfront about that. The second thing is, it's taken me a really long time to want to talk to you about this for a couple reasons. The first thing is, when I got sick, I was very young. I was 17, and it was really important to me that being sick didn't become who I was or part of my identity. So I see a lot of you out there with hashtag Spoonie, hashtag chronic illness on your profiles, and that's super cool. That's never something I felt comfortable or really wanted to identify with, mostly because from the moment I got sick, I wanted to make it as little a part of my life as possible. The second thing is, I just learned this term yesterday and I find it so useful. What I have is a dynamic disability, meaning that sometimes I am really affected by what's going on with my health, and I am out for the count, I'm in a lot of pain or discomfort or not able to do stuff, and sometimes it's totally fine. I've been lucky enough, I've mostly been in remission for the past 10 years, and so unlike my friends who, are in wheelchairs or in a situation where their chronic illness is part of their day-to-day, there are days and even years where I'm not really thinking about it. And so it didn't feel fair for me to claim that title and say I have a chronic illness or I'm working with a disability and try to sort of take that on in moments when it wasn't part of my reality. But having flared recently, I realized that whether it's at the front of my mind or not, it's always part of what I'm dealing with and what I'm doing. And what I try to do first and foremost with CampaignSICK is provide content that would have been helpful to me earlier in my career. And I would have really loved to hear someone talking about this who has been in the game for a while, who has successfully navigated this. And so when I got sick again, it seemed like the perfect time for me to sort of share my experiences. So really quickly, I was diagnosed when I was about 17 with something called Takayasu's arteritis. It's essentially your arteries inflaming, swelling up for no reason. I can put a link in the description. I went off to college where I was on a bunch of meds through a lot of my college career. I was on low doses of chemotherapy. I was also on a steroid called prednisone that I know a lot of you have been on either for short or long periods of time. And then about 6 months after I graduated college, I got my first job on a campaign as a field organizer. And coincidentally, I was mostly pretty much entirely in remission at that point and receiving just infusion treatments every couple months. So did that, and I have to say, I was quite intense. I was making phone calls, doing call time from the infusion center at the hospital, probably driving other patients crazy, which is not something that I suggest that you do. So yada, 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 move up through the ranks of campaign management, do a bunch of field, a little finance, start managing campaigns. And I also developed psoriasis, which is just a gross and uncomfortable skin condition, and arthritis, which is actually probably the most frequent symptom I've had throughout my time on campaigns. You're probably familiar with arthritis. It's swelling and pain in your joints, and it really sucks. So that happened in 2010, right before I was about to take a break from campaigns and go to grad school. I wound up in the hospital with something called pericarditis, which is like a sac of fluid around your heart that can sometimes happen when you have all these rheumatological conditions. And that was the last time that I wrote about being sick for the blog. And that was about 10 years ago. And since then, I've been very lucky that I haven't really had a ton of symptoms. I've had some arthritis here and there, and I'll talk about that maybe in answering some of your questions, but it hasn't been a big part of my life. And then about 3 weeks ago, I started feeling like I was getting a flare-up of all of these chronic conditions at once. I was on vacation in Greece, and toward the end of my trip and during Thanksgiving, I had a lot of stiffness and pain in my neck, continued symptoms until about Friday. I felt like I was having a bout of pericarditis again, which can be very serious because obviously it's affecting your heart and what's going in and out. And at my doctor's advice, I wound up in the emergency room. Side note, for about 11 hours. Emergency rooms are so full right now. For the love of God, please get vaccinated and wear your mask. So that's where we are right now. I am feeling much better. You can hear I have a little bit of shortness of breath. I have some chest pain, but doing much, much better than I was, and on a plan for recovery with my doctor. So that's where I am now. I asked you guys to ask me some questions about my experience living with chronic illness, working on campaigns in the progressive community. I have those in this notebook right here, and I am going to answer them now. So the first question is that why your blog is called CampaignSICK? Great question. No, it's not. CampaignSICK is sort of my own portmanteau of homesick for campaigns. When I started applying to grad school, I knew I was really going to miss campaigns a lot, and so that was what inspired me to start my blog, and it has been such an awesome blessing to be able to stay in touch with the community, whether I'm on the ground, whether I was in school, or right now when I'm sort of working tangential to campaign world, but working in nonprofits. Great question. All right, do I talk to my coworkers and my supervisors about it to set expectations? I think these are actually two different questions. So sure, I talk to my coworkers about it if it comes up. I don't have the type of disability or chronic illness where I feel like it is something where I need to set expectations with my coworkers. But certainly if I'm in pain that day, or if it comes up in conversation, like I'm telling my story of self, in which it figures prominently, or I'm going to the doctor, I don't hide it. When it comes to supervisors and setting expectations, the main thing for me when I was starting out on campaigns was making sure that I was placed in turf where I was near a good hospital. Luckily, my first campaign ever, I was placed in Rochester, Minnesota, where the Mayo Clinic is, so no problem there. But I always wanted to make sure I was somewhere where I could be getting my infusions regularly, and also, if God forbid something happened, I was near doctors who would be able to communicate with my rheumatologist back home. I will, give people enough warning, let them know I'm gonna have to go take a day off next month and get some tests, but that has really been the extent of it. If I am having a really bad day with arthritis, I don't know that I've ever had to leave early in terms of like real world normal person work hours, but if I can't be at the office until 9, I do what I need to do, then I'll go home, finish up work that I need to do from the couch. And so obviously other people have very different needs, but that's how I've sort of set expectations or dealt with it with my supervisors in the past. How can chronically ill people find work, or how can chronically ill people find accommodating campaigns to work for? I would think about this a different way. I would find the campaign that is the right fit for you in other ways and make sure that whatever your needs are, that job is able to meet them, or you were able to meet the requirements of the job. Just because I don't think in my experience campaigns are advertising, different accommodations, so I don't know how you go at it through that angle. I think, the right questions to ask are making sure you know what the expectations, what the hours are, what the working environment is. Obviously, everybody's situation is unique to them. If you believe that you can do the job, but you're going to need some sort of further accommodation to do it well, and you're confident in that, then obviously that's a conversation you want to have during the last phases of your interview or during the negotiation process. One thing that I think is important to note is sometimes we can't do everything. I know that sucks to say, but like there have been times in my health history where I could not have been a field organizer. I just would not have had the physical energy to do that. And that was something I needed to recognize. And those were times when I was able to interact and work on campaigns in another way. So right now, for example, I'm super lucky. I work at a nonprofit where the hours aren't quite as intense as campaigns. I also work remotely, and I'm able to stay involved with campaigns through my blog, through some consulting, but without working those crazy hours. So there are different times in your health journey when different things are going to work for you, and that's okay. How have you approached campaign life, especially the long hours, while managing your chronic illness? When I was younger, honestly, I just powered through it, which is not necessarily the advice I would give anyone now. You know, I mentioned that I was sick through most of college, and when I graduated college, I was so sick of being sick. And I think some of you will relate to this if you have a chronic illness. Like, in a lot of ways, it makes you so self-centered because you have to be thinking all the time, what meds am I taking, and how did my tests go, and how am I feeling, and what are my symptoms? Am I better yesterday than today? And what was great for me about working on campaigns, the same way that it's great for people sometimes after a breakup or something happening in their personal life, is it really helped me get out of my head. And so I threw myself into that campaign. And I really made that my everything in my life. Is that a choice I would make now? Absolutely not. Is that a choice I would advise other people to make? I think that was a very particular circumstance where it worked for me, but no, I wouldn't. As I move further on, as I'm sure you all know, first of all, sort of the further up you get in your career, you have a little bit more leverage to be able to set your own hours. I'm also a person who, in general, irrespective of any health things, really believes on campaigns we should be working smarter and not longer. So I'm not trying to stay into the office until 9 p.m. If there are no volunteers there, there's nothing going on, we're not doing voter contact. Like, why? Especially, you know, later on when I wasn't doing field. There's no need to be physically in the office for the sake of being somewhere. If I was having a bad day and I needed to be lying down or sitting on a couch, I would go home and get my work done for there. I think one thing that's really important to me as just how I hold myself professionally, and when I think about this as a manager, how I would perceive someone asking for help or accommodations, is if you are doing a genuinely good job, if you are working hard, if you're meeting your goals, when you say, hey, I need some time to deal with this, or I need to be working away, working from home for a couple of days because I'm in pain and then I'll be back, you've built up that trust and that rapport and that respect, so that when you tell someone that you need something to take care of your health, it's a no-brainer, or at least it should be on Democratic campaigns. So that's how I've navigated stuff. Also, I don't know if this is a function of being chronically ill or getting older, but I don't have the energy for all the stuff I did when I was younger. I would do call time till 9, spend an hour doing data entry, which is something I don't even think people have to do anymore, thank God. Then go out to the bar with my coworkers until like 2 a.m. and be back at work at 9, leading a canvas like clockwork. That's not something I would have the energy to do at my very healthiest in my 30s. So, you know, you manage your time. All right, let's see what else. How do you set boundaries between running yourself into the ground while meeting ridiculous campaign hours and expectations? I think I've touched on this a little bit, but something I want to say is I think it's actually a lot easier now when I started, or then when I started, for 2 reasons. The first is that, I don't know what the numbers are, but let's say like 50% of campaigns now are unionized. So there are those boundaries put in place that I didn't have as a field organizer. In my first 3 months as a field organizer, we got 1 day off, and the day that we took off was mandated. And I don't mean during the week, I mean we worked 7 days a week for the whole time I was there, except for 1 day. And actually, I worked on a campaign as a field organizer where when I had gotten there, before I had gotten there, the field staff had talked about unionizing, and the management basically said, great, go ahead and unionize, we'll fire you all and replace you. On a Democratic campaign, can you imagine that happening now? So stuff is a little different. We do have on most campaigns, or at least I think we do, sick days and hours and processes by which to request time. So I think those processes being a little bit more formalized are helpful and can provide some guidelines that I frankly didn't have earlier in my career. And then the second thing is the pandemic. We did a whole GOTV and election cycle in 2020 working from home. And that changed things a lot. Now, do I absolutely want us to get back to being in campaign offices and working in person? 100%. I am so amazed by those of you who started out working on campaigns remotely and still love it, because I thrive off that energy in an office and I really miss it. But it has shown that people can do their work in a myriad of ways, that not everyone has to be physically present all the time, that we can make accommodations, that people can split their time, that if someone is sick with something serious, which unfortunately is something that is happening more and more, there are ways to work around that, get them what they need, let them take care of themselves and come back. So I'm really hopeful that this will provide the groundwork for us to move in the right direction and allowing people with a variety of needs who can really serve the diversity of our campaign community and of the people who vote for our candidates in the best way possible to participate in campaigns. How has having a chronic illness impacted the way that I manage campaigns and think about working on campaigns? I wrote about this when I wrote about this a long time ago. I think having a chronic illness made me a more empathetic person. It made me realize that people are coming from a whole myriad of different experiences that you don't necessarily know about. One thing that I was sort of ruminating on this week is being chronically ill makes you a little nuts. There's the side effects of the medication that you're on that can alter your moods, but there's also just the stress of it can really change your personality and make you react in different ways. Now, if you're in the midst of that, do I suggest taking a new job on a campaign? Absolutely not. But I do think that going through times where I wasn't my best self, even though I was striving to be, helped me become a better manager and think more holistically about what's going on in people's lives as I try to manage them. I also talked about working harder or working smarter, not longer, which is something that I'm a big believer in. I also have to say, whenever you overcome something, whether it's something finite that you can beat or something like a chronic illness that you have to learn to manage, it teaches you what you're capable of. And that's a similar experience we get on campaigns, right? One of the things I love about working on campaigns is we set these high goals for ourselves and then we knock them out of the park. And I think being sick and having that experience gave me the confidence to go after my goals full throttle on campaigns, and having this wonderful community around me and seeing that we can do hard things together has made me feel better and has sustained me during all kinds of difficult times in my life, including being sick. And so that knowledge and that confidence for me is really intertwined. And that's something, I know I've heard other people say in the industry, but it's true. One thing you learn being a field organizer and one thing you learn managing a chronic illness is you can do hard things. I hope this was helpful to those of you who are maybe dealing with a chronic illness, working on campaigns, or thinking about going to work on campaigns. I got a lot of people liking and retweeting and saying, yes, do that, when I talked about doing this video, but I didn't actually get a lot of questions. And so if this brings up questions for you, or there's more you'd like to hear, or different experiences you'd like to hear about, please let me know. You can tweet me at CampaignSICK. You can comment below. Let me know what else you'd like to hear about. Stay safe, get vaccinated, wear your masks, and I will see you in the next one.